I'm Frank Garza, and welcome to Here and Abroad, a podcast that follows the U.S. men's national team and their player pool across Europe, MLS, or wherever else they play their club football. The USMNT will be trying to win their fourth consecutive Concacaf Nations League title starting this Thursday, March 20th, with their semifinal matchup against Panama. If they win, they'll play in the final against Canada or Mexico on the following Sunday, March 23rd. On today's show, we are going to preview these upcoming matches, and to help me do that, Kyle Baum from the Sporting News is back. Now, Kyle, when you joined the video today, I mean, you always seem to be in a good mood, but you seem to have like a little bit of an extra bounce in your step this week. Is that because the USMNT is playing?
It has to be part of it, right? Like this is fun. We're actually getting back to games. That winter break is a little bit long, right? It feels like it's been a while, even though you've got January camp. It's a B, C team. This is exciting to get back to first team football.
Yeah, and there's something important. I feel there's something important, on the line. Not everyone gets fired up about the Nations League, but to me, it's a good test, especially if you look ahead to the final on who we might play. But we'll get to that in a few minutes. But let's start with the roster, the 23-man roster that Pochettino called in. When you looked at this roster last week, what stood out the most to you?
Yeah, there's no real surprises on this roster, right? Or at least big ones. You've got the injuries at striker position. That's probably the biggest talking point, is because you're without Ricardo Pepi, you're without Fuller and Balogun, and you're without Malik Tillman, in a creative midfield role. There's really a big hole at that striker spot, and this is the chance that Josh Sargent has been waiting for. This is the opportunity. He's had so many injuries, poorly timed injuries. He's had, a lot of missed chances in the past. He hasn't played great with the national team, even though he's been great for Norwich for probably 2 going on 3 years now. This is the chance he's been waiting for. So that's what really stands out to me. Behind him, there's basically nothing. You've got Patrick Agyemang, who had a really good January camp, still small sample size, still working towards, being a viable option. You've got Brian White, who, you've chosen him over a couple other guys in Brandon Vasquez, and a couple other options. Jesus Ferreira at that striker position. Haji Wright only just coming back from injury, so he seems like he wasn't really an option. But you're looking at the third choice guy now, so it doesn't really make a difference. And I said this before on Twitter: Vasquez and Ferreira haven't scored an MLS goal yet, so they really can't have too many complaints. That's really the only surprise, not even surprise, just like wrinkle to the roster. Otherwise, everything tracks. Everything makes sense. There's a couple of guys maybe who missed out at center back, a couple of guys in midfield. Maybe you're surprised, but not surprised that Diego Luna's there. Otherwise, it's pretty standard.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine a better opportunity coming for Josh Sargent. I know he was in Pochettino's first camp, started that match, the friendly against Panama and Austin. That I got to see and didn't do much, in that match. And then I think did he get hurt and not travel to Mexico? I forget what happened in the Mexico game. But anyway, he didn't do much in that camp. But now we're in some competitive fixtures. He's got really nobody behind him. The job is going to be his this window. And so, yeah, it's hard to imagine a better opportunity. You know what? Let me ask you, were you surprised at the number of MLS guys that got called in? Because that was the biggest thing that stood out to me in the roster, is that Pochettino has preached since he arrived that it doesn't matter where you play, everyone's going to have an opportunity. At January camp, he was kind of like, he was like, these questions about like these guys being like, C roster, D roster, whatever. He's like, I think these guys have a chance. He kind of, to me, backed up his word with this roster. He brought in 6 MLS players that were in January camp, and Agyemang, Luna, and White, they get their first kind of competitive call-ups. So I kind of feel like he backed up his word there a little bit. What'd you think?
Yeah, but there's also not really, none of those guys are contenders for starting spots, and none of them, they're all out of necessity. There's not a guy that you could say on this roster right now who's an MLS player that you could say is there because I really don't know if I want to say this, but I need you to understand what I mean when I say this, is that it's not that they don't deserve the spot, right? Like, all of these guys have played to a point where, given the situation, their choice makes sense. But I will also say they're there because of circumstance, not because they are a first choice squad player. I mean, look at all of them. You've got Patrick Agyemang, the striker position, and Brian White. Striker position is decimated. Okay, Diego Luna is maybe the only one there that you could say has really like played his way onto the roster, and even he is going to be buried on the depth chart in amongst European guys. Tim Ream, it has been passed, I think, on the depth chart by Mark McKenzie, who's playing really well in France right now, and seems to only be there for his experience and his know-how. He's been poor on the field when given the chance, and then 2 goalkeepers on there because the goalkeeper position is thin as heck. So there's nobody there save maybe Diego Luna, who's there solely because they have played their way onto the roster. Everyone there is there because of circumstance, and even Luna, you struggle to see where he fits in amongst the other guys.
Yeah. Luna, you could say he beat out Brendan Aronson, for that roster
and
spot.
Pochettino
The other guys
addressed that specifically, where he said Aronson's just in a position that's too deep. But you're right. You look, Diego Luna won that spot, and Aronson hasn't really done enough to prove he's deserving.
Yeah. Okay, you mentioned Tim Ream, and that's kind of where I want to go next. I want to start talking about some of these. When we think about who the starting 11 is going to be this Thursday against Panama, I want to break down some of the positions. And let's start with center back. Okay, you mentioned Tim Ream there. Is this the window where Tim Ream finally gets replaced in the starting lineup at center back?
Yeah, 100%. I think he's the to me right now, it would be shocking to see Tim Ream get minutes in this window, because to me the starters right now are Carter Vickers and Richards. You've got Trusty, who's there. And you've got McKenzie, who's having a really under-the-radar season in France this year and has taken strides. Now, he's still, prone to mistakes every once in a while. But, looking at this depth chart, I think Ream's 5th on that list. And it would be, to me, not only shocking, but I think poor decision-making if he sees minutes in this window.
I'm curious, why do you put Cameron Carter-Vickers above Mark McKenzie?
Experience, age, and he's playing at a club that, to me, surprised in the Champions League. If you look at in the past seasons, Celtic have been obliterated in the Champions League year after year after year. They get pummeled. That didn't happen this year. They played really, really well over 2 legs against... Was it Real Madrid? Who did they play? Bayern Munich, that's right.
Yeah.
They played really, really well. That second leg even, they played really well at home the first leg. And you're like, all right, home, obviously, okay, fine. They're going to get wrecked in the second leg. And they didn't. They were in it the whole way. And I think that Champions League performance overall, not just those 2 legs, but overall this year, they showed huge improvement, and I think he and Trusty have both gained stature from that. Trusty has still made a few more mistakes than Carter Vickers to me, but I think both of them have gained positioning in the depth chart because of that. I think McKenzie, you still get a caveat from him in the sense that, the level that he's playing at, right? League One is the 5th best league in Europe by far. He's on a mid-tier team in the league. His performances have been great, but he even played well, I think, in the PSG match a little while ago. I remember seeing that he had a good game against a very good opponent. But I just still think you give the Celtic guys a little bit of an edge there.
Yeah. Yeah. This it's going to be really interesting to see who Pochettino puts out there. I feel like every time we do one of these preview shows, we kind of say, okay, this is the camp that Tim Ream, isn't going to start, but then he keeps not only getting the start, but he keeps wearing the captain's armband, And so, while I would personally like to see probably McKenzie and Richards get the start, I'd be okay with Carter Vickers as well. It wouldn't surprise me.
I think this is the one camp, the first camp, where you look at it, you go, if Tim Ream plays, it's nonsensical and it's a mistake, right? In the past, you'd be like, okay, why? But it wouldn't be as glaring of an issue as it would be now. I've made this statement before on this podcast. He's not even the best center back on his club. He's not even the best U.S. center back on his club. And Privet is better. And now, it just wouldn't make sense.
Yeah. I hear you. I'm just saying, because I've been surprised time and time again, if I see him in the starting lineup, I'm not going to be shocked. There's something that, if you look at both Berhalter and Pochettino back to back, really liked about Tim Ream, and those are two coaches that are former center backs, and I don't know, they keep going with them. I would like to see a change. Until I actually see it, I'm not going to be surprised when I see him on the roster, but I would definitely like to see some other guys in there. Let's go to the midfield, which I think is another position with some question marks in terms of who's going to be, in the starting 11. So we have Tyler Adams, Diego Luna, Wes McKennie, Gio Reyna, Tanner Tessman. Johnny Cardoso was called in. I'm still haven't seen an official announcement from U.S. Soccer, but all indications are he is not traveling, did not travel to the U.S. because of an injury. And I've heard that Jack McGlynn could possibly be his replacement. But again, as of Tuesday morning when Kyle and I are recording this, we haven't seen an official announcement from U.S. Soccer. But we can throw him in there. And then I'm going to throw Yunus Musa in there as well, even though he was listed as a forward on the roster. My question here is whether you think we're going to see the return of MMA in the midfield this window. You have Tyler Adams obviously playing at a really high level at Bournemouth right now, fully back from injury. You have Wes McKennie playing week in, week out at Juve. You have Yunus Musa starting every week at AC Milan. He seems to be playing more in the midfield with Milan now versus the right wing. Do you think we're going to see the return of MMA?
The only reason I wouldn't is that it really looks like Pochettino sees Musa as a winger. But if that's the case, I don't see... I'll put it this way. There's no better option for this team right now than putting Musa in midfield. You look at how you would have to alter the lineup if Musa plays on the wing, and it makes no sense. You would have to drop Tim Weah to put Musa on the wing in the starting lineup, or you bench Musa. And then who's the third midfielder? There's just, you put Tessman probably is the guy that would start, in my mind, or Luna. But I just don't, Tessman has made such big strides. If he's the guy, okay, I could understand it. But I still think the MMA midfield right now is the best version of this midfield. Musa has improved tremendously over the second half of this season. I was really, really worried about him in the first half. We talked about it, I think, on this podcast a few months ago, where his passing was just not viable. And it has improved. I don't know if Pochettino trusts it yet in midfield, but I still think that version of this midfield is the best version. If you take Musa out, or you put Musa on the wing instead of Weah, neither of those, I think, are better. So that's the reason why. But I will say the indications seem to show that Pochettino sees Musa as a winger. I mean, the fact that they put him as a forward on the rosters is the best indication yet. And we've seen before where there are other situations, to me, that it made more sense to put Musa in midfield and he put him on the wing. So we'll see. But McKennie and Adams are locked-in starters. There's nobody that are going to take that spot. So it's just about that third position. And right now, I think Musa's the best option there.
Yeah. I do want to note, on the press conference after the roster release, someone did ask about why, Yunus Musa was listed as a forward, and Pochettino was kind of he pretty much kind of was like, I don't pay attention to that. That even could have been an error. He was like, I actually see him as a midfielder as well. However, he does keep playing him out on the right. And I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see him out on the right again, just because if you put Pulisic as like a number 10 and you have Weah and Musa beside him. But
I will say this. I just thought about this. I could see against Panama, against a bunkered opponent, I could see Weah move to right back and Musa up on the wing. That I could see. And Scally benched because you're facing an opponent you know is going to low block you.
yeah,
That would not happen in the final, regardless of if they play Canada or Mexico. Scally would play at right back and Weah would play up on the wing. But against Panama, I could see Weah at fullback and Musa on the wing to get as much firepower as possible.
yeah. Yeah, I guess one of the things I'm going to be looking for is does Pochettino actually start Tyler Adams in that first match against Panama, with this being the first camp he's come into under Pochettino, with him just arriving. I don't know if he arrived on Sunday or Monday. They're just doing recovery those first. They don't really have much time to practice before that match. Does he go with somebody like Tessman in the first match against Panama just for that reason, or does Adams impress him so much in these couple of days that he puts him in there? You could see Adams doing that. You could see Adams coming in there and just like showing the attitude and the work rate that where Pochettino's like, okay, I'm not worried about sticking this guy in right away. But I think that'll be interesting to see is how much just the lack of prep time between the player's arrival and that first Panama match has to do with him, choosing some of these starting lineups.
Yeah, that's an entirely fair point. I could see that for sure. And then if you get Tessman in there, now you go, do we have Musa on the wing still, and then we add Reyna, or do we add Luna as your ball progressor? You need somebody instead of Musa to be your ball progressor. And because it's not McKinney, he's not a ball progressor. He's a pure box-to-box 8. So you need a ball progressor, and I could see that being Musa or maybe Reyna. Okay. Maybe Luna, but he's more of a spark plug than he is a ball progressor.
I was going to say firecracker.
Yeah, same thing.
Okay, so Thursday evening comes. You're sitting down. Match kicks off. What are you going to be watching for when the U.S. kicks off this match with Panama? What are you going to be looking for, watching for, hoping to see?
I'm going to be watching for sharpness and tactical understanding, because these first-team players are still getting their legs under them with Mauricio Pochettino, and I want to see if they understand the assignment. And I also do want to see, against a bunkered opponent, how well these guys keep their heads. Because if we all remember, the last time they played Panama in a competitive match, they couldn't. And I'm sure Mr. Weah has learned his lesson. I don't think we'll see anything there. But I want to see how much these guys panic from an emotional standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, etc., if they get frustrated. And this Panama team is really good at frustrating you. So that's what I'm looking for. And beyond that, just individual performances. I really want it. There's more of an individual story to me in this game than there is a collective right now. And I want to see, how do the center backs perform in this window? How do the goalkeepers perform in this window? I want to see how the midfield gels. You talked about Adams, exactly what you said. Adams' first time under Pochettino, all of that. And Josh Sargent. Show me something, Josh. This is your chance. If you don't have it now, when the heck are you going to have it, right? Like, to me, I don't want to say last chance saloon. That's dramatic. But to me, this is really, I'm going to say it. Like, this is Josh Sargent's last chance. If those guys get healthy and he doesn't perform here, when the heck's he going to get a chance, It's not coming again. And those guys will be back. Pepe's done for the season, for the club season, but he should be back in the summer, I would think. And Balogun's I think he's back in training. Yeah. Like,
Haji Wright's back.
You ain't getting another one. And it stinks for Josh because a lot of his other chances were cut short by injury, which really isn't his fault. But let's see it. I need at least one goal in these 2 games from him, if not more.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. If he doesn't score a goal in either of these 2 matches, I think that's a huge, huge disappointment, for him. What I want to see is I want to see the U.S. dominate. I want to see what I saw in the home match against Jamaica in the first half, where they just came out and they were electric, they were high energy, they dominated. They let off a little bit in the second half, but that's what I want to see. And I know Panama will be harder to break down than Jamaica, but I still think that this U.S. team, if they're going to turn into the team that we want them to, they need to be able to come out and dominate a team like Panama. And when I say dominate, I mean 2-0 would be a pretty dominating, performance, for me. I'm not, asking for anything ridiculous, but I'd like to see them control the game, have a lot more opportunities than Panama, and beat them 2-0 or something like that.
I just want to remind everyone, again, and I've said this a million times, and I'm just going to say it again because it bears repeating. Don't listen to any pundit that tells you, the U.S. are bad at attacking a low block. That's the point of a low block, is to prevent you from scoring goals. It's going to be hard to score goals. You're not going to go up against a team that bunkers and score 5 goals. It's just not going to happen. So don't get sucked into that narrative. You are correct. 2-0 would be dominant. I agree. 100%. Don't get caught up in the scoreline, regardless from if they look good, if they have good attacking movement, if they score a couple of goals, great. They've done their job. Don't get sucked into any pundit that's this always happens when the U.S. plays a bunkered opponent. That's the point. They wouldn't bunker if they just got pummeled 5-0 because the other team had all the attacking possession and pressure. Nobody would do it. So just remember, if Panama bunkers, which they probably will, and try to counter, it's going to be hard to score goals. You just want to see them turning the screw. 100% agree with you.
Yeah. Okay. Good PSA there. Good PSA. Well, let's look ahead to the final. I mean, I know that the players, we don't want them looking ahead to the final, but you and I think we do fully expect the U.S. to beat Panama and make it to the final. And man, I've been kind of on the fence with this one, Kyle. I love me some U.S. Mexico in a final. I mean, to me, there's very few matches I would rather watch than the U.S. versus Mexico in the final of a tournament or a meaningful game. But I'm wondering if nowadays, the way things are kind of shaken out, if it's actually a better, more exciting final if the U.S. plays Canada. What's your thoughts on that?
100%. I love USA Mexico. We've gotten a lot of it over the past few years. And the U.S. has mostly won those games. To me, the only benefit from playing Mexico would be playing in Mexico, because that's the truly tough environment. That's the place where they haven't won and they always stink, and they got to, get better at that. I think, give me USA Canada. I think Canada, first of all, is the better team. And I want the U.S. to play the best teams they can moving forward.
You think Canada is the better team versus Mexico?
I do. Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I love me some USA versus Jesse Marsh. I gobble that up all day. That's fun. Jesse's I don't know what we've decided on here on this podcast, but I'm going to say it anyways. If you want to cut it out, you can cut it out. Jesse's a professional shit talker, and I love it.
Yeah.
And
he does it in a sly way, though. Like he doesn't. He acts like he's not doing it.
Yeah, but you know, right?
Yeah.
And I love it, and I'm here for it, and I want that, and I don't think there's any ill will. I think he's doing it entirely for his team's benefit. I don't think he's I don't think he has the meaning behind it. I don't think he really like hates the U.S. Federation. I think he's got some hard feelings, but like I don't think he actually like, has this animosity towards the U.S. or anybody else that he talks crap about. But I think he does it for his players, and I respect it. I just think that's the more beneficial game, and I think it would be the more fun game. And the U.S. has just played Mexico a bunch. And so I'd like some variety in there. I don't think they've played Canada enough. And they've struggled against Canada. And I want to see them beat a team they've struggled against. I think that's the more beneficial opponent, and I think that would be the more fun opponent.
Yeah. I definitely think winning against Canada will be a lot more difficult for the U.S. than winning against Mexico. And, aside from the tradition of U.S.-Mexico, I mean, Canada has more star power, better, more elite players playing at the highest level than Mexico. And yeah, you have the whole Jesse Marsh thing that's kind of just added to it. And they're going to be so freaking hungry, man, if they do get the opportunity. So I think I'm with you. I'd like to see U.S.-Canada. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Canada has a hard time getting past Mexico. I think that's just going to be a really ugly 0-0 type, 1-0 type of game where there's lots of fouls and Mexico is just going to be playing dirty and doing whatever they need to try and like get past that one. So I think they're going to have a real hard time getting past Mexico. But yeah, that would be super exciting Sunday night to see U.S. and Canada play in the final.
Canada's a really interesting case study because they are in the position that the U.S. found themselves in maybe, I would say, 8 years ago, where you've got 4 or 5 really good players, like the best top-level talent that national team has ever had. And now it's just about filling out the roster with depth. The U.S. has progressed to the place where they have a full, or they have like 8 to 9 top-level players, and a decent enough B team, right? Like that's where the U.S. is. Depth is still an issue, but to a lesser extent. Canada's getting there. You look at who they've got on that roster. You've got Davies, David, Eustachio, Alistair Johnston, I think, goes in that category. And maybe 1 or 2 guys. Laren.
Who's the center back?
Fine.
Who's the center back that's playing at a really high level?
Bombito has come up to be a decent player. And then you've got maybe 3 or 4 guys behind that who were like solid. And they're just trying to fill out the rest of their starting lineup and then the 3 or 4 subs that would come on. So depth is a big issue for Canada, but they mirror the U.S. development. They really do. Just behind it. But they're close, man. They're close. And it's good for Concacaf. It's good for the U.S. to see that, to have that competition. But it's fun to look at them and go, hey, the U.S. was there like 6 years ago. And if they just keep on that path, what you worry about with the Canada Federation is the funding, the financial side of things, and can they keep this up and can they support what they've got? But I think they're in a similar place the U.S. was not that long ago. And if they keep on this path, they're going places.
Yeah. Yeah, we will see. Jesse Marsh versus Pochettino will be awesome. We'll see if Pochettino can get his first trophy with the U.S. this weekend.
That's an interesting point, too, that we shouldn't let go before we finish up, because it's funny that the U.S. has won all 3 iterations of the Nations League, and somebody's going to not win it eventually, right? Like, you can't win every single one of them. At some point, you're going to not win one. And it's going to be this weird, like, how do we balance, oh my God, you're the first one that didn't win it, and it's fine, someone's not going to win it, right? Like, how do you balance those two things? There's a lot of pressure on the U.S. to defend that 3 times title, that it feels like a huge letdown whenever someone doesn't win it. But it'll happen eventually. You've got to take it more in a vacuum than in the context of the wider competition, but it's really hard to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, not only losing it, but losing it to either Canada or Mexico, would especially hurt. Well, Kyle, I will make sure and put links in the show notes, as always, to your X account, which is at @_bonfire, and also to your work at the Sporting News. Thanks again for joining the show, and enjoy the games this weekend.
You too, man. Should be fun.
Thanks, everyone, for listening to Here and Abroad. If you enjoyed the episode, please do me a huge favor and hit that subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube, or that follow button if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or somewhere else. Thank you so much. I'm Frank Garza. You can follow me on X at FrankGarza007, and we'll be back next week with a new episode to recap the Nations League finals.